Fam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Garner
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we are reviewing Locke and Key by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodríguez.
Yes, Joe Hill wrote Locke and Key. It's, of course, a Netflix show now, but the books came out a while ago, collected into a nice, really, really nice hardcover editions.
Yes,
by
the Master Key
IDW.
editions.
Yeah, that's the ones we have. So it's called the Master editions, and they are like color coded a little bit on the cover.
Yep.
Embossed, and just kind of shows IDW Publishing does a great job of collecting their books.
Like volume 1 is blue, volume 2 is green, and volume 3 is red.
Yeah, and even the ribbon inside of the hardcovers matches the spines.
Spot on.
The spine, all of the text, it's just a little nitpicking, but all of the text lines up exactly right.
Yeah. As a collector, you're like, that's good.
The colors are right. It's just
it's good spy.
looks great on the shelf and is actually even looks better when you're reading through it. So that's what we're gonna get into.
Yeah, IDW is a really good publisher too. They come out with a lot. They have a lot of different properties, but they also do a really good job of their collected editions.
I think IDW actually really I don't know if they can control how their books look more than sort of the big publishers. Mm-hmm. I also think the nice part about Locke and Key and a lot of the other IDW runs is that they're already finished.
Yes.
So the problem with like DC and Marvel and some of the other indie publishers is that they make a really nice volume and say like, this collects issues 1 through 20. And then like 2 years later, they're like, oh, we got to collect issues 21 through 40, but they've changed their logo. They've changed their publisher, printer. Yeah. They've
sometimes it's all over the place.
Paper. Yep. And it's like, how are these volume 1 and volume 2? They don't feel the same. They're not the same.
Yes. This run we're talking about tonight actually talks about the whole series. The whole series is about 36 issues altogether, which is kind of our standard omnibus, except these editions that we're talking about are broken into the 3 books.
Yeah, and the books are not oversized, super large. They're actually sort of a manageable, sort of intimate size that works really well. Yeah. And like we talked about, the binding on the book. I mean, if we can just sort of break every book apart and look at it, but the binding is really great. Yeah. The color saturation, the paper is great.
This is actually something you could hold in your lap and not have to do any workouts for.
Yes. and feel like you're not wrestling a 1,200 page volume. Yes. These are just a great collector piece and a great read. And I'll be the first one to say I would read these again. This was an awesome series. This was a really well done, and the writing, the story, 3 pages in. I mean, literally 3 pages. You're like, whoa. Thumbs up.
Like my consensus is mostly that it's a really good book and you should read it. But it was a very a little thought provoking to me. Some of the dialogue is a little rough for me personally, but it really envelops the characters and you really get a sense of how they're talking and discussing. And really gives a good life and a realistic sensibility to them.
Yeah, it's written by Joe Hill, and I guess now is a good time as any. Joe Hill has written quite a few novels, horror books, some sci-fi. Joe Hill also has written quite a few comics. Locke and Key is probably his most famous, is probably the easiest thing to say.
Yeah.
They did win an Eisner Award. He won an Eisner Award for his work in Locke and Key. And his artist, Gabriel Rodríguez, also won an Eisner Award for his work. Right. So it's that's a great award to have in the comic book industry.
Yes.
And Joe Hill really, I think, brings you into this story as if you were just like chatting with as one of them. You don't feel like you're separated from the writers.
It's a very realistic world, just like outside your door.
Yeah. So his style of writing is, I think, real casual, but also instantly relatable.
Yeah.
And so Joe Hill's real name is Joseph Hillstrom King. And his dad is Stephen King. The horror. The horror. And Stephen King, he tried to distance himself from his dad at first. He didn't want to just say, hey, I'm the son of a famous writer, and so
he wanted to make a name for himself.
My books. Yeah. So it was years and years and years before he actually said, hey, by the way, Joe Hill is just a pen name, and my dad is Stephen King. However, I've already won an Eisner Award, and I already have like 3 books published. So
we're just gonna stick with Joe.
So I am my own man.
Right.
But yeah, so he really does a great job as far as writing. But I want to say, like Andrew said, some of the writing is surprising. It's sort of like watching a movie with a bunch of teenagers, and all of a sudden they just start swearing and killing, and you're like, wow, that was
it gets
sudden.
Mature fast.
Yeah, like on page 3. Whammo, mature.
So not for the light of heart or for kids.
Yeah,
not this one.
Don't pass this on to your 8-year-olds.
Yes.
It just takes a level of maturity, and it takes a level of, I think, time and patience, because
yes,
the book and the writing really show their spades when you look at like how long this story is developing. Like it's playing the long game a little bit.
It goes, I think, over a year.
Yeah, and then when you finish volume 1, I mean, you're like, whoa, and you jump right into volume 2.
Yeah, exactly.
So my word for everyone is make sure you get all 3 volumes.
Yep.
And then just read them back to back.
Right.
It's a great way.
If you're starting with volume 1, you don't have to have any prior knowledge either. It's its own series. So, what is Locke and Key about, you might ask? Well, it's about 3 kids. Bodie, Kaisley, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
okay.
Kaisley.
That's how I said it in my head.
And that's how I said Bodie.
Yeah. And then Ty. They're 2 brothers and a sister. So they're Ty is the oldest. I think he's 8. He's going to be turning 18. I think he's in 17. Turning 18.
He like finished high school.
High school, yep. Because part of the story is they're going to high school and he's going to prom. So that's about 17, 18. And then sister's like a grade below him. And then the youngest, Bodie, I think he's about 8.
Yeah, that's probably pretty good. Yeah. The story starts out right away. We're going to try to, like we do every podcast, we're going to try to not do any spoilers. So we'll just vaguely talk about pop topics.
Yes.
and then
you read it.
Entice you to go read the story. But the story starts out, and actually I don't think we're giving anything away because that's kind of how they promoted it, is that their father...
Real quick.
Oh, yeah.
We have not seen the show.
Oh, yes.
So
it's a great precursor.
Yep, it's a great precursor before we start the story. And we open the door, turn the key.
Yeah.
We have not seen the Netflix show. I've seen clips of it. Ramos has not seen any of it.
Yeah, I think I watched like maybe the first episode, but that was when it first came out.
Right.
Which by now was like 2 years ago, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember it.
So this is how we're starting with it.
Yes. So Locke is their last name.
Yes. The Locke family.
Yeah. And Key is one of the objects that appear in this house called the Keystone House.
Yeah.
Yep. And the story starts out with them losing their dad. And so they are now just with the mom and the 3 kids. And the mom tries to cope as best she can. Part of her idea is to move back into the Keystone House. Yeah.
The Locke house. Locke Keystone House.
Yeah.
Where basically the family of the Locks grew up in their whole lives.
Yeah.
It's kind of their ancestral home.
in Lovecraft, Massachusetts, which is funny that it was like Lovecraft.
Right. Lovecraft.
Joe Hill does like H.P. Lovecraft stories.
Nudging right there.
Good job.
Yep.
And it's somewhat of a mansion, so they do show up, and at first it's the typical story that you would imagine, like the kids don't want to move, and they're now in
kind of a typical horror movie would set out to, like, new family or teens move into this big mansion, kind of roams the place.
And it's like the city is not the city that they were in, so they had to move quite some distance, and now they're going to be in a school that
starting over, kind of like the typical, story starts out.
Yeah, they're the new kids now.
The new kids.
And they don't want to look like they're weird new kids. They just want to be new kids, but they have some family curses. Is that a good way to say it?
Curses is a way. Yeah, they are
family secrets.
Yes, that nails it. Yes.
All right. So they have some family secrets in this house, and even the mom doesn't know about them. Which
she is unaware of it through most of the story. So as they're going along exploring this house, they find keys throughout this house. This is the supernatural trope of this series that kind of is a good plot points and everything to bring up. The keys all have different properties and different magical abilities about them.
Yeah. So what I liked right away about that was, it's like, oh, of course, like this is sort of like Jumanji and stuff all kind of combined, right? But like the keys to me are such a good plot point, because you could keep this story going on forever, right? And you could turn it into like, every issue they find a key, and then they resolve that issue, and then the next issue they find a key and they resolve that issue. Well, reading up on the artist, Gabriel Rodríguez, he worked with Joe Hill to sort of map out this world and map out the story. And he said one of the first things that they put on the board was, we are not going to turn this into like the key of the month. Like they didn't want to turn it into some of the I want to say that they're like writing traps where they feel like they're going to introduce a villain, and then like within that issue or maybe the next one, we got to resolve this, like tie it up in a bow. This villain is caught.
And I did appreciate they kind of did their best to not be Harry Potter or any of the other popular series that are going around this.
You can tell that Joe Hill's got some chops. He's got some good writing, ability. Some of his writing gets really like, I want to say serious, but it changes the characters so much that you're like, oh, this is how that character is now, and they do set up the kids in high school sort of stereotypically a little bit. But they also set them up as like, this kid is the punk rock kid, and like this girl is the goody.
Like when you go to your high school, this is what they are. Yeah.
So they just quickly set that up. And I do like that he changes it later on, like that's a pretty awesome way to do that. You set something in stone and then you break it. I really like when people do that in their stories.
So just to give you an idea what these keys do, because like I said, they're not ordinary keys. They're supernatural keys. There is the anywhere key that literally you can turn the door as long as you can picture where you're going. You can go there. There's the ghost key that takes your soul out of its body as an apparition. So like a ghost, essentially.
You could kind of travel around faster than normal, I guess.
There is the gender key, which I will just leave it at that.
That was fun.
The head key, where you can literally open your head and see all your thoughts and feelings and memories, especially memories.
And that key really shows the artist and the writer working well together. I mean, that was a really
I think this was the smartest key. This was
the
like
key.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just such a cool way to try to illustrate that. Like, how do you show that in a logical manner, that makes sense.
Make it matter.
And in the comic, they just do a great job of that. Yep. That was cool.
So those are some of the biggest and most important keys that you start out with in at least the first volume. And that's what kind of leave that hanging as well, because there's at least I would say not quite a dozen, maybe like 10 keys.
Yeah,
I would say
that they've gone through. Now this story, I guess we should remind you that this is done. Like they've wrapped it up.
There are coming out with a few new stories here and there, but nothing as long running as this.
Yeah,
they're just supplements.
Yeah, or just like they're taking little pieces of this like, while this story is going on. But they did did this on purpose to say this is the beginning, this is the middle, and now here's the end.
Yep.
3 volumes.
Right.
They literally named them very similar to that. Like here's the wrap up, and I guess I just want to talk a little bit about the artwork because that's a good lead into after the keys, because some of the
you've never seen art like this.
Yeah. It's really I think at first, so for us just to like sound totally jaded, but if you pick this up at the store and you flip through it, you might say, it looks childish.
Yep.
Which I try not to do because there's so many stories that complement the art. And we've talked about that a lot on our podcast, is that if the writing complements the art and they make sense together, or if the writing complements the coloring and the art together and it puts you in a mood and it puts you in a place, that's the point, right? Like that's why.
To tell a story.
Yeah, that's the great way to do that. And it's just the same as putting on a tone in a novel or a tone in a movie, or even photographs. So the art in this, I think why it looks childish is because some of the eyes are drawn a little larger than normal.
Yes, that we're used to.
Yeah.
Except maybe in a cartoon.
Yeah. If you look at a regular face, you feel like one of the features is off. Like these proportions aren't maybe quite exactly right. And the other thing too is that a lot of times when you're drawing people smiling or you're drawing like hands, usually you don't like draw every tooth, every wrinkle and every
because if you didn't do that in this format, something would be off and it wouldn't make sense.
And they actually have where the artwork has a black outline on almost everything. And the funny thing is things that are close and things that are far still have that black outline. So it kind of throws you off a little bit because you don't really understand like the perspective a little bit. You don't understand how large in scope this picture is. And if you just go outside and you look down the street, not everything's in focus. But in this comic, everything's in focus.
Yes.
And
there's not a lot
where
of
it does that.
unfocused shots.
And so you get this flatness to it. You get like this stark.
It's flat, but still 3D at the same time.
I think that's the colorist.
Yeah, right.
Bit. But so it takes a little bit to get used to the art because you just have to wrap your head around.
You have to put your head in it. You have to put your mindset in it.
Everything's super crisp and clear, and that's just what it is. But the other thing is that everyone who's drawn, from Bodhi to his mom to
some supporting
detectives and things like that, they all have such a unique look. Like you recognize them right away.
And not that it's like unrealistic looking. Like you could go outside and you can find people right. They're just very identifiable.
Yep. And most of the people actually have a really good personality that's connected with that, so that you instantly know, like, oh, here's this person. All right, I know what I'm in for, or you know what I'm looking forward to.
Sure.
So yeah, the artwork and the colorist together, great job. Really crisp, really clear. It's something that when you see it, you'll understand how we're kind of trying to explain it. But I wouldn't want to be the inker or anything like that. It's just a lot of it's a lot of little detail. But the backgrounds too, if you look at some older comics, like we've talked about Golden Age comics and Silver Age comics, comics 1990 and before, right?
Yeah.
They sometimes didn't really do much with the backgrounds, like ever.
No, yeah, just yellow.
Yellow,
white, red.
Yep. And it was
Basics.
just like the characters were there and you didn't.
The point was to tell a story about the characters and not so much the world they were in.
Right. Like if you walked into an office, it was just a desk and a picture frame on the wall and a chair. And, like they didn't really elaborate.
Yep.
In this, though, almost every panel has like a fully thought and fully processed like setting. It's really nice,
Yeah, it definitely gives you the right imagery. You can picture like how you could see this, how you could be in this story, how that world, what that world looks like.
Yeah, and you get the idea that they're in sort of a, I don't want to say like a rundown town.
No, I would say small town.
Yeah, they're secluded somewhat, right? Like they're on an island idea, and everyone in town kind of knows them or knows of them. They're like, oh, that's the Keystone House,
right?
And
East Coast,
yeah. And occasionally the artwork kind of pans out. You get like good spreads. You get like 2-page spreads. It's an easy read because a lot of the panels are even larger.
Yeah.
I mean, every panel is pretty large. So they don't follow the typical comic book layout of 6 or 8 panels.
Oh, per page. Yeah. Absolutely. They definitely break away from the 4-panel, 6-panel. When they more often than they don't.
Yeah.
Very seldomly they'll do like 4 to 5 panels, and maybe unless it's really characters going back and forth. I think they just do like a 4-panel.
So they kind of have to fill the panels with something, and it is kind of neat to even read through and look at what's happening in the background.
Yeah.
And look what's happening like in the next room or by their feet.
Right.
They do a lot of panel copy and paste. Like one panel is the exact one is the next, and exact one is the next.
Yeah.
But one thing is changing or one thing is moving.
Yes.
Or like one door is
so opening. You got to notice all the little details.
Yeah. Where it's like dark, and then the next panel you see something, and then the next panel someone's there, and you're like, wow, right. They took 3 panels to sort of reveal this thing.
Yeah. So build up the suspense.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a Joe Hill thing of like working with the artist and saying, this is the amount of suspense that I want to build. Like this is how I want it to be.
Yeah.
Because you just can't help but to think that Joe Hill learned a lot of horror stuff,
right?
Figured it out, and kind of thought of like, how are they going to take this scene and make it engaging when there's very little happening, but make that little the suspense.
Yeah. So I guess returning back to the story aspect of this, so we follow the 3 kids and the world they live in with the new challenges of the keys that they're introduced to. They kind of motivate them. They get to see what this does, and it turns out there is a killer that's been sealed away that kind of accidentally gets freed, and then they have to
live an ultimate evil,
and they have to kind of live with the consequences of somebody always hunting them down. And that's pretty hard for like 2 high schoolers and a kid and a mom that's recovering from her husband just dying and like recently.
Yeah. Oh, well, and the kids trying to do this without calling the attention
of the authorities,
adults and authorities, just kind of adds to the mother's pending psychosis.
And you really feel for her because she knows that she can't help herself, but that's the only way she can cope. And to watch her journey throughout this series was pretty impactful and pretty incredible.
Yeah, they definitely took the mom as a character that is sort of reactionary to the problems in the book. Like she is not a natural born like hero or fighter. She takes on some vices and decides to sort of fall into herself. And of course you always want that character to redeem themselves.
Yes.
You don't want someone to just be broken
through
the whole series.
Right. That's pretty depressing if that happens.
So you're like, come on.
Yep.
Like here's your last chance. Here's another chance. You just kind of want to root for her.
Exactly.
So the mom is a very interesting character because she has a great character development, right?
Yes.
And every individual in this story has some sort of character arc.
Yes.
Some development.
Everything was well thought out and had a meaningful story behind it, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that idea I had earlier of like, here's the new key, here's a new villain, and then how do we fight this? So at first, I think it does kind of feel like that a little bit because they were introducing a lot of keys.
Oh, yes.
But then the second volume, they introduced another whole storyline. And then the third volume was like, wow, this is a lot to take in. A lot's happening and a lot of characters are sort of crossing. And now how is this going to end?
Sure. I think first volume's a little slow. Second volume starts to pick up the pace more. And third volume is my favorite. It is perfect.
Yeah. It took every
but if you don't have the first two to build on, you can't get here. You can't get here. Even the progression and pacing, I think. Because some stuff you want slow, take your time, get used to the details, know these characters intimately, and then now you can understand and watch them deal with the villain.
Yeah, and the other, they take a lot of these characters and when they introduce them, you're like, oh, that kid's kind of cool. And then I don't know, like a few issues later, you're like, no, not cool.
No, he's kind of
something is that okay? That's really terrible.
That's very terrible.
Yep. And you do, you do connect with each character.
Yes,
and that was something that kept me in the story.
Right,
is that I saw a little bit of myself in each character, in Bodhi.
Yeah, and I think Joe Hill, the author, I think he probably made it purposefully to do that.
Yeah, he wanted to just take anyone at any age because there's a lot of different. There's adults in here. There's young kids. There's teenagers. There's
old people.
High school kids. There's high school teachers.
Yeah,
old people, and you kind of start connecting yourselves with them because they're all so relatable.
Yeah.
So after the first volume, the second volume, it kind of picks up right away. Like you don't miss a beat.
Yep.
And that's the really nice thing. I do enjoy that they split them into 3 different volumes. I don't know if that was sort of like a purposeful trilogy feel.
Sure. Right.
I did read that when this was first coming out, so Joe Hill announced to the writing community in 2007 that he was the son of Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
And by then he had already made a name for himself. He also wrote Heart-Shaped Box, which is a pretty popular novel. He also wrote Horns, which is a movie with Daniel Radcliffe. So he kind of had a lot of notoriety. So then in 2007, he says, hey, I'm Stephen King's son. And then in 2008, the first issue of Locke and Key came out. And if you look that up, the very first issue sold out in one day. All of it was gone. So it sort of, was that because he was Stephen King's son, or was that because people are like, yeah, I'll buy anything you write? So it became popular right away. And the nice thing is when you're reading through this, you do feel that it's like a pet project of theirs. Like you feel like they're really taken to this story, and they weren't just writing it to be famous or whatever.
Yeah. I think he definitely put some passion into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second volume starts opening up a lot more of the story as far as like, sort of these, what their parents did.
Yeah. The past.
The past opens up. You start seeing, sort of like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree kind of stuff. Where
it had some, what would you call it? The Goonies?
Yeah. It had a little bit of
Goonies. Kids going into a cave. Oh, I guess what I'm thinking is the Stranger Things. Stranger Things, it has a little bit of that vibe where like a collection of kids are going to go deal with this supernatural horror. And
like it's a huge supernatural issue. And they're like, we can do this.
We can do this. Come on, we can do anything if we put our minds to it. Probably not. Probably going to fail hard a couple times.
Grab a baseball bat and take on this horde.
So that's what you find out like their parents did. And so, but they don't find out in the typical ways. Like they have to go through a lot of hurdles. That's what I thought was interesting about this series, was the way they flash back to their parents,
Yeah.
or to the adults that were before them, or the kids before them, I should say.
And like Ty, like the older
Yes.
child, he's 17, 18.
Yep.
He's built and drawn like a football
Mm-hmm.
player, and you can see that he is sort of the protector of the family.
Yes.
So he takes on that role after his dad passes, and you can see that he's just trying his best to be like an adult or think about adult things. But he also wants to think about girls, and he wants to think about just, what am I going to do with my life? And, I'm going to graduate high school, and then what? He tries to help his mom, but his mom's like, I'm your mom and I can make my own choices. And so he kind of gets a little lost a little bit. And so you think, at first they set him up as that stereotypical jock protector kid.
Right.
And it's great to see some of the other characters develop more of a backbone and more of like confidence, and the stories about confidence, the stories about like, if you had this key that would allow you to turn into a bird.
Yeah. What would you do with it?
Yeah.
How would it help you?
How can you make a difference?
Yeah.
And how can you use it to save your family or to, change the storyline?
Yep. And I think most of the family, the three kids, like they don't use the keys inappropriately or to do bad things or anything like that, or anything that would go above and beyond. They're doing it to just help their family for the most part, and they kind of keep them a secret for the most part, except for their few friends. They learned that's not the best decision they made.
They're like, these all-powerful keys are not to be shared. That's a pretty safe way. We're saying it's safe to not spoil this,
right?
But volume 2, like Andrew said, I think the pace sort of picks up. Part of that, I think, is because more characters in the story are being let in on the secret.
Yes.
And then you start seeing, okay, now they know the secret. Okay, now they know the secret. Now
Yeah.
they know the secret.
The community,
and so then you
evolves a
see,
little
like,
bit.
eventually this is going to snowball into a big issue.
Yes.
And I have to say once more, the artwork, it's nice to see the art staying consistent in 3 straight volumes.
Yes,
you
don't see it too much.
Yeah,
it's rare.
So many stories where they switch artists in the middle, or they do like one run with an artist and writer, and they say, "Wow, that was pretty popular after all. You should do it more." And then they're like, "Ugh," and then the writer kind of comes up with another story.
Yeah,
that's sort of the whole like sequel problem.
Sure.
That they're like, well, it worked once, let's make it work again.
And then it's not as fresh and appealing.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
But the most important thing here is that Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodríguez stayed through the whole run. Obviously, they worked together through the whole run, and it was always written as one big story. So it's split into 3 volumes, but it's just one solid story. And volume 2 just sort of shows that. I think they really hit their stride in volume 2.
Yeah.
Like everything really gelled well, the art and the writing. And I think they got enough storylines where you felt like this is,
they're really having fun, and they're exploring. They're full of passion, and you're being rewarded for reading the first volume.
Yeah. And like the kids all take on their own storylines that you want to see. And, how is this, you're intrigued. So, so volume 2 lays all the foundation. I'm sorry, volume 1 lays the foundation. Volume 2 kind of makes you more intrigued.
The adventures and all that.
And then volume 3 is like, how can they possibly wrap this up?
It was, I will say, this book, volume 3, was one of the most satisfying endings I've read in comics in a while.
Yeah, that's probably,
for me.
I mean, I think when I was reading it, because I read it, I don't know, shortly before Andrew did, and I just said, this is like so strong, like start to finish. When you're reading it, you might kind of start pick apart some things, but when you're done, and you look back on it, you're like, whoa, that was a great arc. Like that's what it's all about. They came up with a really, really great idea. Now for the storyline, it actually holds within a year, maybe 2 years. I think a year passes in the first book or so. But then when all of this sort of picks up really fast, you can tell it's just happening like in a week, right? Like it's one right after the other. And you start seeing that more flashbacks. You start seeing the storylines kind of connecting. So like the children start connecting to their parents. Then you realize there's more parents in town that sort of know this secret, and that their kids now are trying to
evolve. It's kind of, it
know?
stays in the family. It stays in the community of friends that they've built out. And so they're trying to resolve that. They want to put an end to it. And
because you see their parents didn't end it. And so now the kids are like, we have to like really finish this. We have to really make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody again.
Right. I guess that's kind of, we're talking about more references to horror pulp culture. I guess you want to talk about it. It was kind of like that. I seen both 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of similarity, I guess, to his dad's work. That, I guess there was that generation 1, generation 2 kind of thing, or when they were younger, that has happened, and then when they got older, they had to resolve it.
Yeah, and all of those stories, I think, is where he took a lot of his reference from, probably a lot from Stephen King, but I mean, all of his references as far as
this feels fresh, I guess.
Yeah, like even Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street, or really any of those that are multi-generational issues where the ultimate boogeyman was not he was not taken care of, and he was not fixed.
Right. Yeah.
But some of the artwork is, I mean, there isn't any straight like scenes that are not appropriate, because they kind of like keep things hidden, I suppose. But there is some, like stabbings and violence, and there is quite a bit amount of themes that I think are not appropriate for
younger
everyone.
Audience.
Yeah, even just everyone.
Yeah.
Some people just don't want to read comics and kind of get into all of that.
Yeah.
But you do get to see sort of the flip side of how to use each one of the keys.
Yes.
You get an idea at first of like, this is the head key and this is how you use it. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they use it a different way.
Yeah.
And they use it a different way. And that's just like,
I definitely think all the keys at some point or another, they test their limits.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. I definitely think, because they don't try to abuse it, but they want to figure out what's the most effective way to use it, and then how can we go above that?
It's almost like your creativity.
Yes, is your imagination. Yeah,
can use this key in many, like that one where it turns you into a bird. I think you ask 10 people, what would you do? And you'd probably get 10 different answers.
Yes.
And that's why the story is a little bit open-ended, where you can almost take it in any direction.
Yes.
And I'm glad that they actually finished the story.
Yes.
That they said, this is the end, because this could have been dragged out and run around forever.
Yeah.
That's why I wonder, what are they going to do with the Netflix series? Or are they going to?
Yeah, I think they announced recently that they're in production for season 2, and they're hoping to do a third.
And then maybe just say that's what it is.
Maybe. Could be. Like we said, we haven't seen the show at the time of this recording. But I will say, I'm going to share one quote from the book. I won't say where it is, because that'll be giving it away. But so there is, I guess, this underlying theme of grief, and how you get over that grief of their father throughout this book.
We should talk about some of the themes there.
So I guess this quote was like the jaw-dropping one for me. It says, death isn't the end of your life. Your body is a lock. Death is the key. The key turns, and you're free to be anywhere, everywhere, 2 places at once. Nowhere, part of the background hum of the universe. And so I think that was such a memorable line for me of like, wow, he instantly connects death and whatever is beyond to the keys in this house, and how each key turns a door, and just kind of did a really good job of tying this book together.
Well, and you notice that everyone that found a key and used a key were like changed because of it.
Yes.
So it wasn't just sort of use this key and you can get dinner for tonight.
Yep.
You know, it was like use this key. It profoundly changes how you think of the world, like the possibilities of the world, and like it changes you to the point where you're living
there might be some consequences
a different way. Yeah, you're like, you know, you can pass through walls, or you bear witness as a ghost to other people's conversations, and then you think, wow, that's how they really feel, you know. And there's always that sort of astral projection, sort of telekinesis, psychic ability in comics where, you know, they do stumble into thoughts or conversations of other people that they're really not supposed to hear. And then you can't help but to maybe take it out of context and think, that's how people really think about me.
Yeah.
You know, comics like to do that, and they kind of like to flip things on upside down and give you one direction and then kind of like say, oh, that's not really how it was, but you took it that way. And that's kind of fun to flip it. I think the keys sort of showed each person like their true personality.
Oh, sure.
You know, because the keys can be used for bad, and sometimes they are. But it just goes by the personality of that person.
Yes, the like, beholder. Of the
key, yes. You know, how would you handle this kind of power? And you would hope the first reaction of people isn't to abuse it. But I think there's a lot of people out there that were like, yeah, heck yeah. You know, I think, you know, if there was a key that just made a pile of money show up, you'd have people use it for different reasons. Yes. You know, one person might donate it to charity right away, but you know, it just goes kind of into that personality. And that just goes to show the strength of the writing again, of setting up a character, giving them certain traits, giving them a disposition, and then saying that's the inherent personality of this character. So it doesn't matter how much you entice them or how much you promise them, you know, dreams beyond their wishes. That's still their character, and they're not going to break that, you know. And that's kind of
that's awesome.
A great way. That's a great way to do it. But yeah, I think Locke and Key is a great story. It takes a little bit to get into, but once you're in it, you are in it.
Yep. You want to see the payoff. You want to see where the story goes.
And of course, we always suggest that you get the hardcover volumes. IDW Publishing, look them up as far as every volume they have. They are an awesome publishing company, and they really care about the stories.
Yes, and we love them.
Get the master edition.
Yes.
Cover price on these is $49.99, but you can find them, like we have always said, at some discount places like InStockTrades.com, CheapGraphicNovels.com. Give me another one.
The internet.
Find it. Look it on eBay.
Yes.
Who else was I thinking of?
All right. And that's another review for the Bam Pow podcast. This is Andrew Honor
and Chris Ramos
signing off.
Thank you very much.